very much for the introduction, Dolores, and it's really nice to meet the members of your chambers in the Niagara area. I'm going to talk briefly about the Talent Opportunities Program. Again, feel free to enter any questions in our chat or ask them questions after. I'll try to keep it fairly short. And there's a lot of information on the slides. I will leave the slides with Dolores so that she can put them online or share them with her members in whatever way she wants. But I'm going to highlight some of the key points about this program. So we started this program 2 years ago. Let's see here, move the screen. Hopefully things move, there we go. And the program is designed to help employers located anywhere in Canada hire college and university students on work integrated learning placements. Work integrated learning might mean co-op placements, it might mean internships, it might mean some sort of other work placement that a college or university might need to do to satisfy their course requirements or learning requirements within their program of study. Obviously, employers can gain access to some great talent and young talent. We know that talent's a big issue right now in the business community. And of course, the program itself is there to assist in the hiring. And what that means is providing a wage subsidy up to 50% to a maximum of $5,000 or up to 70% to a maximum of $7,000 for students in underrepresented groups. And so basically what this means is the subsidy will max out when a student's wages hit $10,000 within a work term. The program is funded by the Government of Canada. You might hear Student Work Placement Program or SWIP. The federal government has other delivery partners who provide a similar grant. We are a program that provides the grant for all of Canada, but obviously we do a lot in Ontario because that's where we're based. Local chambers themselves can access this grant too if they're hiring a student through a work integrated learning placement, and of course for the members of the chamber as well. Some key eligibility from the employer side: you do need to be a registered Canadian business or not-for-profit organization. Wage subsidies are administered at the end of the placement. So we will approve an application, but we don't pay any money until the end of the work placement after all the documents, final documents have been submitted, which includes pay stubs, etc. Obviously, you should be compliant with laws and things like that. You cannot be subsidized by another federal funding program. So the wages for the student cannot be subsidized by another federal funding program, so you cannot stack federal funding, because this is federal funding on top of other federal funding you might be getting. There's no restrictions in terms of industry sectors, except for the notable exclusions that are kind of at the bottom of the screen. Financial sector employers such as banks, insurance companies, companies operating in similar areas such as those that originate loans and things like that are excluded. And of course, government entities and organizations in partisan political activities are excluded. There is a question: is there a PDF summary? So there is a website that provides a summary. There's a program guide out there, and as I said, we will share these slides with Dolores as well for your future consumption. In terms of eligibility for the student, and this is really important because most members of a chamber would be eligible under the employer criteria, right? You would be registered, you would be in Canada, you would be following all the laws. You probably won't be getting other subsidies for the student. What is important is to make sure that your student qualifies, and they do have to be registered as a domestic student, and they have to be Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or persons with whom refugee status has been conferred. So international students cannot be hired under this program, or they can be hired, but they can't be funded under this program. The student does need to be enrolled in a program or course where a work integrated learning component is part of their study plan. We will ask for documentation that you will get, or the student will get from the school, to show that. So if they're in a very much a formalized co-op or internship program within a school, then that they would be eligible. They'd be able to provide some sort of a co-op document to show that. Some students or schools or programs don't have a formalized program like co-op, but they still have a work component that they should satisfy for their studies, which could be for credit or not for credit. In those cases, we would ask you to get a letter from the registrar, their department, the professor, something that will prove that, yes, what they're doing on your work term with you in this term is a work integrated learning, is satisfying work integrated learning for that student. You have to avoid conflict of interest, so you shouldn't hire somebody who, if you're hiring somebody who's related to you, you would not be eligible. The students also need to provide some basic information and sign a student agreement. And the reason is students' personal information like their wages, their citizenship status, etc., will be shared with us, with the government to assess eligibility. So the student does have to agree to sign a student agreement and take part. Over the past years, we've never encountered a case where a student did not sign a student agreement, or it was very rare, and they were always convinced that they should sign a student agreement in the end. So that problem never really arises. And students must be on the employer's payroll. I think that last bullet, I don't know if it's cutting off for some people, but the last bullet says students must be on the employer's payroll. So you cannot hire them as a third-party contractor. You cannot offer them a stipend. They have to be on payroll. You have to take deductions like EI and CPP and any other applicable other deductions that you would take as a regular employee. Marissa from Brock says they're really happy to facilitate the process for WIL experiences. So definitely get in contact with your local schools in the area to find eligible students, right? There is a hand up with somebody's name called Zoom user. Do you have a question right now?
Rima. That's Rima. Rima, do you have a question? Oh,
no, sorry, yeah. Quick question. Is it available for just Brock, or is it available for like the other universities, Waterloo and a couple of other ones?
Yes. So basically any college university, publicly funded college university is eligible for the program.
Okay, thank you.
Like a private career college or something like that would not be, but like Brock, Waterloo, U of T, Laurier, et cetera, they would all be eligible. Niagara as well, absolutely. The key is finding a student that is eligible, right? That's where most of the applications end up getting declined is a student may not be eligible. Not every student would be eligible. One piece is the domestic students. So sometimes someone's hired international students, and other times there is no work integrated learning component. So this piece is really important. It differs a little bit about from this, kind of the summer job grant that some of the chambers access, right? In that case, you're just hiring a generic summer student. They may not have a work integrated learning component within their program of study. So you do have to check that part. And that's why working with the schools like Marissa from Brock or that co-op office from Niagara makes a lot of sense, because they'll be able to identify for you those students who are in work integrated learning and haven't found a placement yet. Some funding details: we have approximately 700 subsidies available for this year, right, for the next year. So for this fiscal, starting this summer semester, and then again another 700 placements for the next fiscal. We talked about the subsidy levels, 50% or 70%. If they're in an underrepresented group. So Indigenous persons, persons with disabilities, newcomers, first-year students, visible minorities, women in STEM, they qualify as underrepresented and could qualify up to 70% in terms of wage subsidy. In terms of accessing that 70%, there is a limited number of 70% we can give because of our funding envelope. So I want to keep that in mind, that you could have an eligible student in the 70% category, but we could run out of money in that category. So you may only get 50%. We're not at that place yet. And also the student has to self-identify to be in one of these categories. So you may think someone's a visible minority, but if they don't self-identify as a visible minority in their student agreement, you would not be eligible for 70%. It is on a self-identification basis from the student themselves when they do their student agreement. Very important, funding is only available to net new placements. What does that mean? If your business or company or organization has never hired a student before and has never access top or other SWIP funding, then any placements that you apply for could potentially be funded. However, if you had, for example, last fiscal year, hired one student, you would have to hire two students to get funding, and you would only get funding, be eligible funding for that extra student. Okay, so incremental placements from the first time, prior to the first time you accessed funding under the top or any other SWIP program. We work our subsidies based on terms or specific funding terms, which basically align with most terms of colleges and universities, so summer, fall, and winter. The important piece to that is two things. One is the student does need to be satisfying work integrated learning within the term that you've hired them in. So for example, if a co-op student is actually a co-op student or supposed to be on co-op in the fall, but you've hired them in the summer and they cannot provide any documentation to show that their summer work is part of work integrated learning, then you would not be eligible, right? The second important thing about the timeframes is we only apply the subsidy calculation on the wages earned within the term. So if you hired a summer student from May to August, we would calculate the subsidy based on wages earned between May 1st and August 31st. Some companies may hire a student a little bit earlier than May, right? They might get them started at the end of April, or they might extend them to the beginning of September, and that's okay, that's up to you. But when we do the subsidy calculation, we will only calculate the subsidy on the wages earned between May 1st and August 31st within those funding periods. If a student has a placement that spans multiple terms, so some students have co-op terms or work integrated learning terms that might span 2 semesters, you could be eligible for a wage subsidy for both semesters. You would apply a second time. There would obviously have to be money still available in our pot, and you would still have to provide the documentation that the student is, yes, indeed, completing a second work integrated learning component back to back, but you could have a back-to-back subsidy for the same student. How to apply? We have applications now open for summer 2022 term. We are, of course, partway through the term, but I know, and maybe Marissa can jump in, a lot of students who may still be looking for work integrated learning opportunities for the summer, and contact the schools because they could find you a student for the rest of the summer. We only approve applications basically after you've hired a student, and that's because we need to know who the student is to assess eligibility. We also require the employment contract just to prove that you have, yes, indeed, hired them on your payroll. So you basically have to hire the student to be enabled for us to fully approve your application for funding. After that point, we'll reserve money for you and wait till the end of the term to collect all the rest of the documentation and pay your subsidy out. And so there is a little risk, right? Because you basically have to hire the student. You've got to be sure you've hired an eligible student. Otherwise, you could be disappointed. And other documentation we'll collect is a midterm check-in, pay stubs, there's some exit surveys, and obviously the documentation in advance to prove that the student is eligible and the company is eligible. The website is at the bottom. If you can't remember the whole URL, if you just go to occ.ca to start, scroll to the program section, and you'll find Talent Opportunities Program right there. Just to let everybody know, even though we fund for summer, fall, and winter terms, because we have limited number of placements and dollars available, we can potentially run out of money before the winter term or even partway through the fall term. This is our first year of the program kind of post-COVID. We'll call it post-COVID, even though I know COVID's still, around, but we'll call it our first term post-COVID. And so we're not exactly sure the trends of businesses and how they might be looking at their hiring. We are expecting that fall will probably run out of money sometime in the fall, but if you have summer students, whether you've hired them already, if you've hired them already and you know they should qualify, you can still apply, okay? As long as our application portal is open, you can apply. And at some point there might be a wait list, but right now you can get in to the queue. And like I said, we'll probably run out of money sometime in the fall. And if you're not sure, and if you're applying in the fall, you can certainly email us and ask us if we've run out of money before you look into your hiring or applying for the program. I think that's all the slides I have, and I'm happy to take a couple of questions if there are any.
Great, thank you, Jason. I do have a question for you.
Yes.
How many applications can one company get at any given time? So let's say it's the first time they're applying and they want to hire 4 students. Would all 4, assuming they all meet the criteria, be eligible for the funding?
Yeah, great question, Dolores. And there is no limit to how many subsidies any single company can be approved for. So you're absolutely right. If they've never hired students before, this is their first time applying to the program, and they hire 4 students, 2 in the summer, 2 in the fall, they could potentially get 4 subsidies out of this program, assuming that there's money still available, right? That's always the caveat, is assuming there's money still available in the pot.
And so if companies have, like I'm thinking of, for example, accounting companies who hire, co-op students every year. They've never used the program before, but they've hired co-op students for decades. They would also be eligible.
Yeah, you would absolutely be eligible, but the net new will be in effect. So if they historically have hired 10 co-op students every year, the first 10 students they cannot be eligible for in this year if they applied, but any students above and beyond the 10, they can apply for the subsidy for it. So that's what net new means. What the spirit of the program was to increase the number of students a company is hiring. And so if a company had been hiring a number of students before, That's why net new is in place to encourage above and beyond the existing number of hires. Now, if you did hire a student before, for instance, if you hired 2 students in the past and you're applying for this program and you need to hire, let's say 3 this year to qualify for 1 potential subsidy, you don't have to wait till you hire the 3rd student to apply for the subsidy. You can apply right away when you hire your first student. What you will do is you will attest to the fact that you are planning to hire 3 students this year, and we will apply the subsidy right away so you can get the money straight away. You don't have to. So an example would be a company might hire 3 students, 1 per semester. They used to hire 2 students. Now they're hiring 3 students, one per semester, summer, fall, and winter. You don't have to wait till the winter semester to apply for your subsidy. You can apply for your subsidy for your first student that you hire right away in the summer. In the application, it asks you to attest how many students you hired in the past. You would say 2. Then it will tell you that, ask you how many students you plan to hire in this fiscal year. You're going to say 3. Then it's going to tell you you're eligible for 1 subsidy this year, and you'll apply. And then we would approve that 1 subsidy right away without waiting for the fall or the winter semester to come around. Obviously, you need to share the accurate information. Obviously, if things change and you feel like you're no longer eligible, then you should come back to us and say, oh, we thought we were going to hire 3, now we're going to hire 2, so we're not eligible. Please cancel my application. Obviously, things are subject to audit, they're subject to audit potentially, but of course, it is based on an attestation. We won't audit you, but obviously the government always has the right to audit any grant money that goes out.
Yeah. And so just so I'm clear, if someone traditionally hires, let's say 3 students through the summer, and they decide, we would like to hire maybe 1 or 2 for the fall, those would be new and those would be eligible for the subsidy.
Correct. Those would be eligible, exactly. But you can apply for the subsidy using the students that you've hired in the summer.
Right. Okay. Does anybody else besides me have any questions? I can't see.
If you have any more questions, our email is top@occ.ca, very easy to remember. So feel free to email us. And of course, I will share these slides with Dolores.